Okay, are we live? Yep. Okay. All right. So, welcome everyone to the first installment of the Chalky Talk series. What highly selective colleges really want. Today, I have a guest of panelists with me from left to right. That would be Jonathan from Stanford, Kaelyn from Stanford, Ross from UC Berkeley, and Yasyf from MIT. My name is Dennis, and I'll be your host for tonight. And I am a rising freshman at Stanford. So just some housekeeping duties before we get started officially. To your right, you'll see, on the right side of your screen, you'll see a Twitter chat box. And if you tweet us with hashtag Chalky Talk and with a question, then we'll be able to see those come up, and we'll answer selectively as many as we can as we go along throughout this talk. Just as a disclaimer before we go ahead, this is the first installment of the series, so what we're going to be offering today is just primarily general tips for the for admissions to selective colleges and universities. So while we will be answering specific questions as well, we'll be catering to the more general overview of the process and allow subsequent weeks of talks to do the more specific stuff for us. Okay, so let's just allow our panelists to introduce themselves a little bit. So, Jonathan, let's start with you.
So, hi, I'm Jonathan. I'm from Southern California. I went to my high school was a small private Jewish school, San Diego Jewish Academy. And I guess while in high school, I was really involved in journalism. I ended up being the editor-in-chief of my school's paper. I also did a lot of self-studying stuff. Like I ended up taking a bunch of extra APs that were not in the standard curriculum for my school, and I also self-studied languages in my free time. I guess one thing is probably also worth mentioning is I did a lot of music and still continue doing it. I played the accordion and have been doing so for about 10 years. And I was part of some theater orchestras and also did some solo and group performances. I guess I also was a fencer, but that's probably not anything that helped me get into college because I've only been doing that for about 2 years. But FA's fun. So, next person.
Awesome.
All right, hi. Oh, okay, okay. I'm Kaelyn. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. For high school, I went to a fairly large public school. It was fairly new, so we weren't really established, and we haven't sent anyone to like a really big name university. But in high school, I did a lot of choir and a lot of volunteering through my church. I ran track all 4 years, was captain my senior year. I don't think I did, well, okay. I did a lot of summer programs, like going to Cornell and MIT and doing some programs there. And let's see. Other than that, I picked a few clubs and really focused on that instead of doing the whole gauntlet. And fun fact about me, I'm a vegetarian. So there. Next person.
Cool. So, hi guys, I'm Ross Teixeira. I'm an incoming freshman. Well, freshman now. I just started at UC Berkeley. I'm from Riverside, California. I went to a small private Catholic high school. You know, we weren't really well known. So we didn't have that many AP classes. We had a lot of problems with scheduling and that kind of stuff. But I really loved my school. I was on ASB for 3 years. That was a blast. I did a bunch of volunteering around my city, stuff with our city, Riverside, California. They have this Smart Riverside program where they provide computers to people who can't afford them and help fix them. So I work with those guys a lot. Did some other volunteering stuff, and I also love writing. I worked in the school's newspaper for a while. I couldn't take many AP classes, but I took as many as I could. And fun fact about me, I used to run a music YouTube channel with like 4,000 subscribers, and I thought I was cool.
Wow. All right. Okay, Yasyf, how about you?
All right, my name is Yasyf Mohamedali. I'm a freshman at MIT currently, born and raised in Vancouver, BC. Yes, that's in Canada. I applied as an international student and got accepted to MIT, University of Chicago, and Carnegie Mellon University in the States, as well as several Canadian universities. And I'm currently considering studying computer science and physics with an emphasis on computer science. So I spent the majority of my free time in high school sort of immersing myself in science and technology, particularly coding and anything to do with computers. Also threw in a bit of entrepreneurship there. And I also spent a considerable amount of time in school debating and public speaking.
Awesome. Okay, so lastly, I'll introduce myself a little bit. I'm Dennis. I'm a freshman at Stanford University, and I am also from Canada, just like Yasyf, but I'm from the East Coast, so a little different flavor there. And so obviously I applied as an international student. I loved and played basketball for the last however many years I can remember. Recently I just discovered an interest in computer science and engineering, so I'll be studying engineering, probably computer science at Stanford. So yeah, okay. Now hopefully that helps you to get a bigger general picture of our panelists here. Now let's get started with some of the questions that you guys asked us previously while you guys were signing up for the talks. So the first of which is, how important are SAT scores, GPA, and other objective data? So how we can do it is, if any of you guys want to answer this specifically, just raise your hand, and then we'll go to you. John.
Right. So, I mean, and this is a lot of speculation, but the thing is that when you're applying to top-tier schools like Ivy's, Stanford, pretty much any school that has less than a 25% acceptance rate, pretty much everybody that is a serious candidate for the school is going to have a very high SAT or ACT score and a very high average GPA. The thing is that just comparing like between assuming that you're doing weighted GPA with APs, comparing a 4.1 to a 4.2 is almost meaningless. And the same, like, I took the SAT, well, I only took the actual test twice, but I took a bunch of practice tests that were literally just old tests and got them scored and whatnot. And the thing is that on any given day, your score could go up or down 200 points. So as long as you're sort of above a certain mark where you'd be like at the 50th percentile for that school, it's not going to be what makes or breaks your application. It'll be like, it's important, but nobody's going to say, oh no, you're not getting in because you got a 2230 and this person got a 2240. That just doesn't happen.
Okay, I'd just like to add on to that.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So I completely agree with everything that was said there, and I'd just like to add on that the way it was described to me, which I found really useful, is it's basically a checkbox on your application for the admissions committee. So as long as you're above sort of their minimum for what they're looking for that school, whatever percentile that may be, it doesn't really matter how much higher than that you are. So obviously these scores are important, and it's important to do well on the standardized tests, but once you get to that level that you need to, it really doesn't matter. So it's not something to stress over to get, the perfect score.
Okay. Anyone else want to add anything about that topic?
Okay, I'll add something. So just to, I guess, reassure you guys, I took the SAT probably about 3 times, and I never hit 700 on any one category, and I'm still going to Stanford. So, like, if you're strong in other areas, your intelligence will shine through, and it's not completely, scores don't matter that much.
Oh yeah, Jonathan, go ahead.
It is worth adding that if you're talking about less than the top tier of schools, and while obviously the average SAT score at those places is much lower, if you do have a super high score and you're applying to a middle tier or lower tier school, they might just say, okay, your score's high enough, we'll just let you in. goes a lot farther at the other schools.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd say the more sort of exclusive the school is, or the harder it is to get into in terms of admissions rates, the less your score matters for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So I just want to add something onto that myself. So I took the SATs twice, and so what I found is that, you know, in the end, what happens with SAT scores is just like what Yasyf said. It's a checkbox, right? And essentially, you know, they are important in that, you know, they are good to have, and you know, they are a filter that, you know, most admissions offices use to see whether or not, you know, they even consider your application sometimes. But in the end, SAT scores, you know, GPA, APs, that stuff is good to have, but it's not going to make or break your application. So, you know, if you're going to kill yourself just trying to get those scores up and focus all your attention on that stuff rather than what you're actually passionate about and what you actually love to do, then that's definitely not a good idea if you want to get into a selective college. Okay, so
I'm
Ross, go ahead.
going to add to that. I agree with everyone. If you're above a certain point, I mean, if you have to decide between either trying really hard to get an extra 100 points on your SAT maybe, or joining another extracurricular that you really want to do, go for the extracurricular. After a certain point, it's just really not important, and it's better to focus on what makes you who you are rather than just your objective data.
Also, one thing that at least was what my college counselor told me, and I'm bringing this up since Dennis mentioned AP scores, is that your score on the AP tests themselves doesn't matter all that much. They are much more interested in the fact that you took the class, and they care very much that you take the test. But they would prefer that you take the test and get a 1 than to just not take the test, unless it's a financial issue. But at the end of they don't look that much at how well you did in any given AP class. That's more for once you've gotten in, can you get more credits?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so there's a relevant question that just was just shot out by Ryan Seffinger, and he asked, "Is it safe to only take the ACT for top tier college if I scored really well on the practice tests without prep?" So I guess the question is, would you guys recommend that they take the SAT? Does it matter? Or, you know, did anyone of you take the ACT? Or?
I took both, and did way better on the ACT than the SAT. And I think the tests are very different, so I'd say at least take a practice test and see which one you're more comfortable with, and then, you know, go from there. And definitely, if you can, send both scores if you do end up taking both tests.
But also keep in mind that different universities do have different policies on what they require. Like some might accept the ACT, but then also need SAT subject tests. So it's definitely a good idea to look into what the specific university's policy is before making that decision.
And it's worth noting that if your university is going to make you take SAT subject tests, and you kind of ambivalent between like you're equally good at either of them, you are going to have to do the full SAT sign-up to take just the subject tests. So it's a bit less paperwork to go the SAT route. That having been said, if you don't have to take subject tests, the ACT has much easier paperwork, or so my sister tells me. She's taking ACT, I took SAT. So there is a little bit of workload minimization, but as far as prestige, they are exactly the same.
And on that note, since they are treated fairly equally by a lot of universities these days, I would say that it's definitely worth taking both just to see which one you do better at, because they are very different tests, and you might find that one is a lot more to your liking than the other. Since you choose which scores you send, there's no harm in trying both.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So my take on that is, in the end, what happens is, you know, it's a score, and it's really, whether you take the SAT or ACT, it's not going to hurt you. It doesn't really matter. It's not like a college admissions committee looks at one over the other. Places one highly over the other. So yeah, that's not a problem, definitely. Okay. So let's go back to our general question list that was compiled over the last couple of days. So there was this question from, I'm not sure who it was from, but it says, what can we do during our senior year to stand out? Or is it too late if you haven't already? Does anyone want to take a stab at that?
One thing I did my senior year is if you see something that your school needs, like if you and a group of friends are really interested in something and your school doesn't have a club for it, then go and start that club because it shows leadership and initiative, and it can actually be a lot of fun, and it can like it'll go on. It's like kind of leaving your mark on your high school. So that's something that can help you stand out.
And to add to that, I think another good alternative is I know a lot of kids think that if they haven't done enough by senior year of high school that it's too late and they have to go out and try a bunch of new things to try to stand out. I would say instead of going and doing something completely new, if you already have a passion or something you really care about, I would pursue that because the universities would much more appreciate you doing something you've already done and have really excelled at and that you care about a lot than taking on a whole bunch of new activities just for the sake of the applications.
That having been said, if there is suddenly something you just found out about that you think is absolutely amazing but you have no history in, feel free to do it for fun. Just on your app, don't make a huge deal about it and say, oh, I did this. Like, mention it if it's relevant, but don't build your app on something you just started.
Do it for the sake of doing it, not for the sake of having something else to put on your application.
Agreed. Anything from you, Ross?
Yeah, I'm your application is all about, trying to hone in on this aspect of you that really makes you who you are, and you're trying to show that to the colleges as much as you can. But at the same time, you don't want to, sacrifice your passion just for your application, because in the end, that's not going to help you in life either. So if you feel like, starting something up that your school needs, then yeah, go for it. But at the same time, if there's something, if you just like doing what you're doing, if there's something you've already been doing that you really, really enjoy, then try and take it a step further,
Awesome, thank you. So I have I actually had a really unique situation for my senior year. What happened was that, I started up an organization. It wasn't a club in my school, but I started an organization because there was this adverse political climate in my state. In my province in Ontario. So what was happening was there was this conflict between teachers and the government where the teachers were going on strike. So, and that just happened after I sent out my applications. And so even after I sent out my applications, I started that organization because I was really frustrated that students were put in the middle of something that didn't really concern us, right? And that organization actually became a pretty big deal in the province. It reached tens of thousands of people. We got something like 800 likes on Facebook. But what I'm trying to say here is that if like Jonathan said, if you really find that opportunity that you really want to explore, you then just go for it, right? I did this after I sent in my applications, but a great thing is that as long as up until probably around February, you can send in updates. So you can send in letters, update letters, telling them what happened since you sent in your application. And I think that was a crucial cog in my application that really helped me get into Stanford. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, just to add to that quickly, I think this may be MIT specific, but MIT actually sends out a questionnaire or a little form when you send in your midterm grades asking if you have anything to add to your application. So don't be afraid to keep doing things after your initial application is sent, because there's always more chances to show new things you've been doing.
Definitely. Okay. Anyone else want to add anything? No? All right, so let's go back to the tweets that have come up. So one question is is it important to have extracurricular activities relating to your intended major? Anyone want to talk about that?
90% of schools don't really ask you to say an intended major, or will be completely happy if you just say undecided. So no. However, the caveat I'd put is that when you're creating your app, you're sort of trying to tell a story about yourself of like your educational and cognitive progression since the beginning of high school, essentially. So if you are very much a math and science person, it would make a lot of sense if you get involved in science projects, robotics teams, stuff like that. But if you are kind of all over the place, like I'm pretty diverse, and as far as majors are concerned, I have no idea what I'm going to end up doing. You don't need to worry about running into a major already. A lot of schools won't even let you pick a major until sophomore year. So that's a few cents.
I think this comes right back to the thing that I was saying earlier, is that the activities you're doing, you should be doing because you enjoy them or because you have passion for them, for the sake of doing them, not for the sake of adding them to your application. So if you happen to be doing activities that are related to your major, that's great. But if not, these schools don't really care because, as was said earlier, most of them won't even let you pick a major until your sophomore year. What they want to see you doing is activities that you're passionate about and that you want to be doing because you find them fun.
Yeah. Kaelyn, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I keep going on the whole passion thing. Like, if you, let's say you've always wanted to be, like, a doctor, and you find ways to, like, volunteer at a hospital or do, like, absolutely put that on your application, and it shows that you're, like, committed to something, and, you know, that could very well lead into you being, like, a human biology major or something like that. But I don't think it matters all that much in the long run.
Yeah, I know definitely for UC Berkeley, we don't choose our majors till sophomore year. And so if you're the kind of person who likes doing a lot of extracurriculars in a lot of different fields, you don't know what you like to do, but you just like doing stuff, that's fine. That's part of your story. And you should try and, you know, talk about that in your application. Let them know that, you know, you're not really sure, but you love getting out there and doing things, and you're still trying to find your way, and that's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, just as an add-on to that, I'm seriously considering going to engineering, and on my app I think I wrote something like economics first, and then it was like biology, and then it was like finance or something like that, and I'm not going to any of those. So first of all, they don't really care what you put in your in whatever you write, and secondly, all of my extracurricular activities, none of them were engineering based. They were all like Model UN debate, student council, things like that. So in the end, does it really matter from my unique perspective? No, right? So, and from these panelists as well, it doesn't matter that much, but you should be able to demonstrate passion somehow. Okay, so there's a question about recommendations. So how can a student get good teacher recommendations from teachers? Do you guys, anyone want to start with that? We can do that briefly.
Yeah, I think probably the most important step is asking your teacher in advance, because come senior year, everyone is going to be asking their teachers, and chances are your school has like one or two really good teachers that everyone loves, and everyone's going to be after them. So if you talk to them early and, you know, hand them whatever information you think they need to help write a good report on you, or if they don't want one, they just want to write one for you. Always do it early so that they have more time to write a good one, or else they'll be rushing to do, you know, a bunch of them at the end.
Yeah, and to expand on that, I would say that it's always most important to pick teachers that you really connect with, that really know you. So there may be, you know, a few teachers at your school that everyone says are the best to write recommendations, that everyone likes. But if they aren't the ones you've connected with and you really feel a bond with, I don't think they're the right ones to write your recommendation, because the best recommendations are the ones that truly show the teacher has experience with you and really understands you and your passions, as opposed to just talking about you from the perspective of a teacher.
And do you think that teacher has to necessarily be a great writer or something like that, or do you think it really doesn't matter?
I think that obviously if, you know, they're a better writer, it's going to be helpful, but I think you should put much more precedence on the fact that they know you and can relate with you than any other things like their writing style.
I mean, I definitely agree with absolutely everything that's been said so far. One thing that I feel should also be touched upon is that most places require 2 teacher recommendations in addition to dean of academics, or basically one from your school as a whole. And what really helps is getting teacher recommendations from teachers, or if you get one from like a community leader, like someone from your religious institution, or someone who worked with you on like a charity program or something outside of school, all the same. Get 2 recommendations from different fields. Don't get your biology teacher to give you one recommendation, your chem teacher to give you another. They want to sort of see a bit more of a holistic picture. So, for example, I got mine from my chem teacher on one hand and my econ teacher on the other. And just sort of picking one from each field, so to speak, can help.
Cool. And what do you guys think about? What do you guys think about in terms of the recommendations? Because a lot of schools do accept extra recommendations. Did you guys submit any? And what do you guys think of them if you did?
I think that adding extra recommendations is only really worth it if you have a good reason to. So if you have someone, once again, who you feel like they can really explain your passions and describe, what makes you stand out as an applicant, then it's worth it. But if you're just adding on another recommendation for the sake of having someone else say good things about you, I don't think it's worth it at all, because the thicker your application is, the longer it takes to get through. I mean, these applications, people have to get through tons and tons of these applications. You want to make it as easy as possible for them to get through yours without any unnecessary stuff.
I agree. And if the essay is just going to say things that other teachers may have already said, or whoever else you request a recommendation from, then it's not worth it. It's not going to add anything new to your application.
Yeah, just in general with anything that's sort of optional or supplements. Now, there's a difference between recommended and purely optional. Like, a lot of schools have optional but recommended. If that's the case, definitely do it. But if you have something that's purely optional, like the artistic supplements, only add that supplement if it's really something that you think could make the difference in your app. That's like this completely new dimension, proving something or other about your character.
Yeah, definitely. Like, again, back to my situation, because I founded that organization after the application process. I actually did go to get another additional supplement, but that was from my principal, and it was because when we founded that organization, we worked very closely with my principal in founding it, right? So, my principal knew a lot about our passion for it and everything like that. So that really did add a lot of value to my application. But would I recommend you just going to get another recommendation just for the sake of quantity, just because three is bigger than 2? Definitely not, right? So in terms of the application process, quality is always better than quantity, especially when they have to sieve through thousands of applications every year. All right, okay, so let's go to a question specifically for Yasyf that was asked of us a couple days ago. So, Yasyf, how do you show that you are passionate about a certain major?
Okay.
And this is specifically for MIT.
Right. So I'm going to start with a bit of a general answer and then focus in on MIT. The simple answer is to show by doing. I mean, as the common adage goes, actions speak louder than words. And it is infinitely better to write about some real-world application of your passion than such as a cool project you initiated or you worked on, instead of just describing how passionate you are about something. So if you are truly passionate about whatever area or major that we're discussing here, you will have already embraced it in your life, and you will be doing relevant activities in it just for fun. So if you've been doing this, excellent. Pick 1 or 2 of the most influential projects or activities and focus some essays around them. And if you haven't been doing it, then I wouldn't say that you could describe yourself as truly passionate in the area. And I'm not saying that it's too late to start doing projects in that area, but at that point it would be unfair to say this is what I've been focusing on, because if you haven't been doing things just for the sake of doing them because they're your passion at this point, then you shouldn't be saying you have. So for MIT specifically, I know they encourage you to be very creative and expressive on your application. So to give a personal example, I have a passion for computer science and for programming. So when I was putting together my application, I spent many hours putting together a digital creative portfolio that showcased all the little coding projects I'd been just tinkering with over the past few years. And then I included a link to that portfolio in my application. And I think this is successful, but it was only successful because I truly enjoyed working on that stuff and because I did it for fun. And I had all these little projects to showcase, and that I started them because I wanted to, not for the sake of putting them on my application. So I'd say if you really are passionate about whatever this is, and you do have all these, like little projects or activities that you've been involved with just for fun because you enjoy them, then the best way to do it is to put together some sort of creative way of representing that and add it to your application.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so Kaelyn, let's go to you. For this, let's start with you for this question that was asked minutes ago. So, do you think it's necessary to win prestigious awards like Intel or Siemens or National Merit or whatever it is to get into these selected colleges? Do you have any experience there, or if you want to talk about that?
No, it's not completely necessary. I mean, if you do, that's awesome and highlight that, but I mean, there's a lot of kids that don't win those kinds of awards and they get in perfectly. As long as you have something that stands out about you and shows like what you're passionate about, then you're fine. You don't need an award to demonstrate just how brilliant you are.
Right. So, does anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I can.
Any major awards?
I can add to that just by saying, like she said, the awards aren't necessary. If you've won them, that's great. But even then, I wouldn't focus on them in your application. I wouldn't just talk about how you've won those awards. I would use those awards as another vehicle to demonstrate some unique aspect of your personality. So these applications are all about making you stand out as an individual and making you different from all the other applicants who look virtually the same in terms of grades and standardized tests. So if you're going to write about an award you won, write about how it impacted you as a person, or how the process changed you, or the work you put in to get there. Use it somehow to show another side of your personality. Don't just say, I won this award and that's that.
Definitely.
And I'd like to add on a bit that, I mean, as we've said, you definitely don't need it. Like, I don't have any. It does help. However, don't think that just because you got prestigious award XYZ like Intel or something means that now you have a ticket in. Because one of my classmates did win an Intel prize, and she was one of 3 students this year that applied to Stanford, and she actually didn't get in, whereas the other 2 of us did. So it's definitely something that helps, but sort of as Yasyf said, it's not even necessarily going to be the defining point of your app.
Right. Yeah, so just my bit about that. So I was an Intel finalist myself, but so I applied to 6 of the top schools in the States, so Harvard, Yale, Princeton, whatever, and Stanford. And the only school I got into was Stanford. So clearly that major award, wasn't necessarily something that sealed the deal. And just to give you some more background, I know one of my friends actually won a gold medal at the International Biology Olympiad. So that's basically, he's one of the top biology students in the world, and he actually didn't get into any of these schools. So like Yasyf is definitely right. Having a big award in your application is definitely a boost. These awards and things like that, they show that you're smart enough, and they show that, okay, maybe you do have a significant interest in that, but you really have to have that shine through in your essays, right? And there's most of the applicants, or at least there's a good portion of the applicants who are smart enough to get into these schools. But at the end, what they want isn't just people who are smart enough, but people who have the right personalities, who have the potential to change the world. So something that I saw in Chalky just recently by one of the mentors was that these schools, they don't want people who achieved. They want people who will achieve in the future, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, so now let's go to a question about junior year. So this person asks, are junior year grades the most important, or are each year's grades considered the same? Does anyone want to start with that?
I'd say junior year grades are the most important if you're deciding to apply early to a school, because that's literally like the last thing that they see grades-wise. I applied restrictive early action to Stanford because I knew my grades through junior year were particularly strong. So, like, other than that, I'd say your freshman and sophomore years aren't as important as your junior, but you still need to be strong in them because, like, you need the whole picture for your application.
Yeah, I mean, sort of everybody says it's the most important, which it's true, but it's sort of misleading. The others are still very important. It's just your junior year can sort of be a saving grace if your sophomore or freshman year grades aren't as impressive. However, essentially what the colleges are okay with seeing, I'd say, is that if you kind of didn't do such a great job in freshman, but then you're improving in sophomore and junior year, and then junior year you have very strong grades, and then if you're not doing early action in senior year first semester you have strong grades, they will be okay with that. But definitely if you're listening to this in your freshman or sophomore, this in no way means that you can sort of slack off those years. You do need to keep up persistent performance to give yourself the best chance. You're not out for the count if you had a bad freshman or sophomore year, but you do need to work at it.
I would definitely agree with that in saying that, well, you know, your junior year grades do give you a chance to, I'll say, redeem yourself, for lack of a better word. It's definitely important, if it's not too late already, to focus on those earlier grades. It's definitely not a ticket out, just, you know, being able to think you can slack until that point. And, I mean, let's face the facts. If you do well in your junior year, you are still at a disadvantage compared to someone who did well in their junior year and as well did well earlier. So if you can, keep the grades up consistently.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else want to add to that?
No, I agree with everything that's been said.
Oh.
So.
All right. Awesome. Okay, so let's go to another question that was asked a couple days ago via the sign-up system. So I'm not sure if you guys would be able to answer this one, but does school district really matter? So this person says, I go to a brand new magnet school in a low-performing school district that has not had a Stanford attendee in 30 years. Will this reflect poorly on my school and my application? From Ellie. I guess since the question is directed at Stanford, we should, the Stanford panelists should answer this one. Does any of you want to answer that? Or, because I can chime in if you guys want.
You can go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so, yeah, Kaelyn.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay, all right, so basically, I come from a school in Canada, a public school in Canada, that isn't really considered a feeder school. Like most, you know, there are feeder schools out there that, you know, send multiple people to Ivy League schools and top institutions every year, and my school was definitely not one of them. And so, does it put you at a disadvantage? No, but it definitely puts you in a different situation. So it's a different game that you're playing, in the sense that, you know, if you were in one of those feeder schools and you're one of the top students in those schools, then you have a really, really good chance of getting into, you know, what your schools of choice. But if you're not in a feeder school and you're one of the top students, then you still have to, you know, be, that's not as big of a plus as it would be if you were from a feeder school. So it doesn't put you at a disadvantage. It all depends on how you deal with it, right? I would definitely aim to be in the top 5% in grade-wise, GPA-wise in your school if you are from a low-performing district. But yeah, it's just a different ballgame. It doesn't put you at a disadvantage one way or the other. Okay. All right. So,
can I add one thing on that? I guess not so much based on school district, and it's a little bit of a different situation for private schools. in that there seems to be a thing that essentially universities will learn to trust specific private schools. So to a point, some of these schools do have to quote unquote prove themselves before they start like sending several students to Ivies. Like just thinking of my school, it was only around 5 years ago that we really started sending 4 or 5 more student, like a significant percentage, it's a very small school, a significant percentage of the graduating class to Ivies or similar ranking schools. So there is a little bit of a progression there. However, if you're going to a public school, this isn't, well, I guess refer to what Dennis said, but there's no bias that you're going to have to deal with so much.
I'm gonna try and answer here. I think one of the things you have to remember with school districts is that the better the school district is, the more competitive people it's going to attract. And so when a school district is considered really competitive and really efficient at sending kids to top schools, that might not necessarily be reflective of the school. It may be more reflective of the kids who go to that school for that reason. And so what they're really looking at is whether you used what you had. You know, if you went to one of those schools that offers tons of APs, tons of really great programs for students and quality grades, you know, did you take advantage of it? Did you do as much as you could? And if your school doesn't have all that stuff, you know, did you try to create it? If it wasn't there, did you take the initiative? And so there are schools that they trust more than others, but you have to remember that it's all about what you do to take personal advantage of it.
Right. Yep. Definitely agree. So I just want to clarify a question that Steve asked, and the question was, if awards and grades don't really matter, then are essays the only thing that matters? So I think what all of us are really trying to say is not that awards and grades don't matter, but that, you know, it's really a holistic process. So that, you know, if you don't have one thing here or one thing there, then it's not the end of the game, right? And that's what we're really trying to say. Awards and, you know, grades, they mean a lot if you have them, and I mean grades especially, right? Because, you know, everyone is expected. Everyone who applies will have, you know, generally pretty high grades, and, you know, if it comes down to it, if you have a similar personality or something with someone else, and then it just comes down to grades, that's a pretty bad way to go out, right? So, not sure if you guys want to add anything to that before we move on to the next question.
I'll add to that in saying that I would agree that it shouldn't be interpreted what we were saying before is that we want to discount things like grades and awards, but I would say that at this stage in the game, if we're talking about the universities that we've been talking about, you know, the more exclusive ones, the awards, not so much the awards, but definitely the grades are more of an expectation as opposed to something that can really boost your application, which is not to say if you don't have them, you're screwed, but it means that if you don't have them, you're definitely going to be making up for them somewhere else in your application.
And, I mean, sort of to reiterate something we said kind of earlier in the program, which is that grades and standardized test scores, they're like a checklist. Essentially, if you are above, if you have scores that would be considered quote-unquote average for a top-tier school, it's sort of like, okay, you've qualified, now let's look at the rest of your stuff. Like, no one's going to be nitpicking over your 4.1 versus 4.2 or a 30-point differential on the SAT. It's going to come down to something else. However, those high GPAs and high SAT scores are what's going to get you in the ballpark to begin with, or essentially what's going to get people to look at your essays.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's a checkbox. You have to have it checked, but once it's checked, it doesn't matter, you know, how well it's checked.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. All right. So, does anyone else want to add to that, or should we move on to the next question? Okay. So I just want to address something that Joy asked as a follow-up question to the public school and school district question. So, if you go to a really competitive public school, will colleges compare you to classmates more than your fellow applicants? So one thing to definitely consider is that all of these colleges, even though there's, you know, however many tens of thousands that apply, you are really not competing with all of these people in your pool, right? What you're competing with are, your niche. So, if you're competing against people who are like you. So if you're Asian, if you're African American, otherwise, right? And then there's other things like, if you're if you go to a public school like that, or if you go to a private school, they look for different things because in the end, what happens is they try to compare you and your ability to be able to use your resources to the resources that you're given to its fullest potential. So if you can demonstrate that you can use your resources better than everyone else can use like a similar set of resources, then that is what they really like to see, right? So they wouldn't compare someone who is from like a poor district to someone who's gone to private school for 12 years of their life, right? That just doesn't happen. Anyone want to add anything to that, or?
I would just say, having said that, it's important to remember that yes, you're being compared to people who are coming from similar situations, but that's not to say that it's any easier coming from one situation to another. It's just different things that are being compared.
Yeah.
It's also worth noting that it's sort of, and this is more even, not even just to give you a fair chance, but to make this job doable for the people at the universities, is that it's also stratified based on what your interests are. So if you go in and you're like a super heavy STEM person, a super intense engineer, you're going to be compared against the other STEM students. Whereas if you're a super strong English student, if your background's really more in the humanities, that's who you're going to be compared against. Because you can't compare, like, say, a STEM prize to being published in a magazine or something like that. There's just no analogy.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so in the coming weeks, we're going to be touching more on this topic, essays specifically, but there's a question that I think would be useful to address in terms of essays. So this person asked, when writing a Common App essay, should you be explaining each detail or should you leave things vague for narrative effect? So who wants to speak to that?
I mean, it depends what exactly is going on here. Like, do you literally need to say every single thing that you did that is even slightly relevant to this? No. But if something's important, put it in there. I mean, this is sort of something that is kind of going to be unique to your given essay or situation that we can't really give a generalized answer to.
Yeah.
I mean, feel free to prove me wrong, anybody else that is sitting here that doesn't.
Yeah, no. I would agree that that's a very difficult question to answer because it really varies from situation to situation, and it really depends what you're talking about and what the context of the essay is. So I say that one is really up to personal discretion and how much detail you want to go into.
I would like to add one thing with regards to the Common App essay. What you can kind of do is sort of write an essay and then retroactively pick a prompt. Like, essentially talk about what you want to talk about and then find the prompt that best fits it, because in the worst case you could go with the write your own prompt option. It's generally better to fit it to something else, but I mean, I think I did the prompt of a literary artistic work that affected you and so on, and it essentially ended up being an essay about utilitarianism and how this affects my personal philosophy. You can sort of play with it, and they're definitely very lenient as far as subject matter.
Right. I would definitely agree that it's better to write the essay first, and then, if this is an option, at least try to fit it to a prompt, because it's much better to talk about something you feel is applicable and something that you are passionate about and want to tell the application people about, as opposed to trying to search your personality for something that matches one of their prompts.
Yeah, okay, definitely. All right, so I guess that is sort of a teaser for future talks which will be with a different panel, specifically catered to essays. That will probably be happening in the next week or two. So if you are interested in gaining specific advice about essays, definitely tune into that. So as we're entering the last 10 minutes, I think there's one crucial question that actually was just asked and by Alex, and that we should answer. So what do you believe was the critical piece that got you into your current institution? So I guess the more general question is, why do you think you got into Stanford, Berkeley, or MIT, right? So let's just go down the panel, starting with Jonathan, and speak about it for 2 minutes or however long you want.
All right. So what I'd say probably helped me the most is I did a lot of stuff. Like basically, I looked at my school's curriculum. I took high rigor classes, and then I was like, okay, well, I could do more. So, I mean, it went in a sort of weird roundabout way. I wanted to go into my school's AP Calc class, which was where all my friends were, and it didn't fit my schedule. So I ended up taking AP Stats, but basically, I really wanted to take Calc, which in hindsight was a bit of an obsession with that one class. You don't need to take Calc to get to any given school. But so I ended up taking that outside of school with a tutor. And then I sort of went, okay, I'm already doing extracurricular stuff to augment my curriculum. What else could I do? So I sort of went, well, okay, I'm really good at history. So I'm going to buy the AP book for the AP, sort of first take the practice test and see how much I need to improve. And what I ended up doing was actually self-studying for a few APs on top of it. So I was showing an initiative outside of the standard curriculum. In addition to that, another thing I did is I found this cool website, Duolingo.com. We'll see about putting a link in the notes for the video. But basically, you don't need to use that one, but I went and in my free time learned how to speak German fairly well. And actually, I started junior year, and by the time I was writing my apps, I was pretty close to fluent. And that was with actually a fairly minimal amount of effort per day, just sort of actually doing it every day, even for a few minutes, really gets you very far. And it's actually one thing I noticed sort of just by casually looking at everybody and accepted the Stanford's profiles things, is that there are a lot of people that are like, pretty much everybody there speaks 2 to 4 or more languages. Like, there's just a very, very high degree of polylinguality. So they definitely like people who can speak multiple languages, and it's something that you can pick up with just actually a fairly minimal amount of effort per day, as long as you're routine about it. So I highly recommend doing that. And yeah, just sort of, if you find that your standard curriculum isn't stimulating you enough, go and find other stuff. There's no real excuse not to go and learn more stuff in your spare time. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, just to add on to the languages part, I think one thing that we did miss a little bit is that it's great to pursue a second language for 4 years during high school. So I know that most colleges do like to see that, right? And if you could, like what Jonathan said, most people who do get in, or at least quite a few, are proficient in at least 2 languages, right? So more than just English. All right, Kaelyn, how about you?
I'd say what got me into Stanford was probably the way that I spent my summers outside of school. I've always loved engineering and the human body, so in my summers I would find summer programs at other colleges, and I would go and do study there for a few weeks. I think the biggest one that I did was the MITE program at MIT, and that's right after your junior year. And through that, I got to take some classes at MIT, and also got to do a genetics research project at the Broad Institute. So I think if you can find a program like that that completely fits your interest and allows you to kind of go above and beyond what you can learn during the school year, that's really going to set you apart and help strengthen your application.
Great. Okay. How about you, Ross?
All right. I would say the most important thing I did to get accepted to UC Berkeley was all started out from joining ASB freshman year, when I really didn't know what I wanted to do or what was going on. ASB was an incredible experience to help me meet people. We did so many things, and the people I met, I would take on personal projects with them. They shared volunteering opportunities with me that I then did with them around the city, and I did some incredible things over the summers that great for me and were great for my application. And so I think starting on ASB and getting to know the people I knew and doing the things I did, that was what really helped me the most.
Sorry, what exactly is ASB? Could you elaborate on that?
Oh, ASB is the Associated Student Body. It's basically the school's governing committee where we take complaints from students and report them to the faculty, and we solve them, in addition to putting on all sorts of different events.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. How about you, Yasyf?
Okay, so what do I think got me into MIT? I think, as I may have hinted at earlier, it was definitely the fact that I was able to demonstrate a clear passion for something and show that I really, took this passion to heart and did things related to it for fun and in my spare time, and was constructive in that manner. So for me, that was like sort of computers and programming and all the little projects I did around that. So I mean, I think I demonstrated this was a fairly unique passion and talent, and I showcased all of my work. And the most important thing, I think, was the successful and clear communication of how excited and dedicated I was to the field. So, I mean, as an example, there was a bunch of projects I submitted, including a few applications I ended up getting on the Mac App Store, web design business I started locally at home, an assortment of things. So I think the biggest thing there was the communication of not just being able to do these cool things, but being able to demonstrate what I did and how excited I was about what I did. So if I had one sort of lasting piece of advice, whatever your passion may be, it's to really embrace it, to be interesting, to be unique, to stand out. I mean, all of these schools have thousands of amazing applicants. They're virtually indistinguishable, and you don't want to just be another set of grades. You need to find a way to stand out in the eyes of the admissions officers. So that means, whatever that means, if that means trying new activities, striving for leadership positions in old ones, or just demonstrating your passion for something. You need to be creative and interesting, and you need to stand out.
Right, and one thing I just want to mention about Yasyf is that he is an international student applying to MIT from Canada, and about 4 get in every year, so he was one of 4 from Canada. So that's something that he didn't mention. Anyways, about myself, I've thought about this for quite a bit, and it's really important. It's almost impossible to pinpoint exactly why you got in or something like that. There's just so many factors going on. Who sees your essays first, whatever, all that stuff. But in the end, I think like my greatest virtue was probably, well, first of all, I had a set of awards. I had the Intel ISA Finalist Award, and I had a National Math Olympiad Award. But those just demonstrated that I was smart enough, right? And especially as an international applicant, especially if you're applying to Stanford or MIT or like these 2 schools are notorious for being extremely stingy with Canadian acceptances. So if you're a Canadian out there and you're applying to these 2 schools, just know that having great awards won't cut it. So again, what happened with me is that, again, back to the organization that I founded. I think so my awards, my GPA, my SAT scores, my APs, that just demonstrated that I was smart enough. That put me maybe in the top 20% of applicants. But then it was by showing that initiative, showing that perhaps entrepreneurial mindset, the willingness to start something new, right? Something especially that is really celebrated at Stanford. I think that's what put me over the top. So in the end, that just really goes along with pursue your passions, right? So I didn't start that, obviously. I had already submitted my applications. I didn't even know you could submit additional supplements until someone told me afterwards. But I started that organization because I was truly passionate about it. So if you and one thing that I found when you're writing essays and stuff like that is that if you're truly passionate about something, essays just flow really, really simply, right? And your drafts will come out beautiful, right? If you're really passionate about something. So make sure you write about what you're passionate about.
Just to add to that, on the topic of essays, I just want to quickly add that I talked a bit about not only doing these activities which you're really passionate about, but clearly communicating them. And in case it wasn't clear, when I said that, I meant as in demonstrating that in your essays. So I think the essays were the most important part of my application in that sense, in the communication sense. And I definitely think it's worth spending the time on the essays, doing the multiple revisions. I know there are some people who will do one draft, think it's perfect, and be ready to send it off. But I would definitely recommend, take a few days after you've done all your essays, come back to them, and do several drafts, because those are really what are demonstrating your personality to whoever's reading your application, and they are arguably the single most important thing on your application.
All right. Okay. So does anyone have any last words they want to mention before we close this up?
Wait. So if people are tweeting with the hashtag Talks, can we still answer their questions over Twitter if they keep tweeting?
Yeah. Yeah. So like that's. Yeah. So we didn't get to all of the questions that people asked today, but just because due to time. But after we get off, we'll try to answer as many of your questions as we can. Right. And so in terms of this talk, what you can expect for next week is something similar, but the topic will probably be on essays, more specifically applications, and maybe scholarships. And we'll have a different panel of people for next week who can talk more specifically about those details. And we hope you enjoyed and you had a lot to gain and learn a lot from this talk today. And just remember, all of us are on Chalky as mentors, so if you guys want to follow up with any of us in terms of whatever we said, feel free to shoot us a mentorship request or a message, and we'll get back to you, right? And so, again, thank you very much for attending this talk, and stay tuned for next week. So it'll probably be on a Monday again. We'll let you know, and thanks again. See you guys.
Good luck.
See ya.
Bye.
Luck.